What about Princess Beatrice and Eugenie? They've, of course, fled the UK and are reportedly barely holding it together, Josh.
What if the calm, smiling royal everyone thought was harmless was actually standing at the edge of one of the darkest scandals ever tied to the elite? Because right now, whispers inside royal circles are turning into something much louder, something far more explosive. The name at the center of it all? Princess Eugenie. And according to the storm of claims erupting around the Epstein files, investigators are now asking questions that the palace hoped would never be asked. Not quietly, not privately, but with the weight of international investigators and victims who say they're finally ready to talk. For years, the narrative around Jeffrey Epstein focused on powerful men, secret flights, and a web of influence that stretched across governments, billionaires, and celebrities. But now another layer of that story is crawling into the spotlight, and it's far closer to the British royal family than many people ever imagined. The latest claims circulating suggest that Princess Eugenie is panicking after being questioned by international investigators. And the reason? Allegations that money tied to Epstein didn't just flow to the usual suspects, it may have reached royal hands as well. According to the emerging claims, investigators are digging into reports that payments connected to Epstein didn't stop with Sarah Ferguson. For years, the public believed the Duchess of York was the only royal figure linked financially to Epstein's generosity. But now, critics are asking a far more uncomfortable question. What if the money trail didn't stop there? What if it extended to her daughters? That's the accusation currently echoing through royal gossip circles. The suggestion that Princess Eugenie may have received money from Epstein, money that victims claim came with expectations. And those expectations, according to the most explosive whispers, involved helping smooth over uncomfortable situations, introducing Epstein into elite spaces, and helping keep certain stories from exploding into the public eye. And suddenly the timeline people once ignored is being examined again. Because the truth is, Eugenie and her sister were not children during some of the most controversial moments surrounding Epstein. They were young adults, old enough to understand the headlines, old enough to know the man had already been convicted, yet the association continued. That moment is now being replayed again and again by critics. Because when the royal family visited Epstein after his prison sentence, Eugenie was 19 and Beatrice 18. Not children, legal adults. Old enough, critics say, to recognize the gravity of the situation surrounding a man convicted of crimes involving underage girls. And that's where the public mood starts to shift. For years, the sisters were portrayed as collateral damage of their parents' disastrous connections. Two young women unfairly dragged into scandal because of their father, Prince Andrew, and their mother's questionable friendships. But some observers aren't buying that story anymore. They're asking whether the sisters were simply passive witnesses or active participants in a circle of influence that benefited from Epstein's money, connections, and access. And suddenly the question isn't just about who knew Epstein. It's about who benefited from him. Emails from Epstein's communications have already fueled speculation that he maintained contact with members of the York family long after his criminal conviction. One message reportedly suggested that one of Sarah Ferguson's daughters might show him around Buckingham Palace. Just the idea of that is enough to send shockwaves through royal watchers. Because if Epstein, the man whose name became synonymous with one of the most disturbing trafficking scandals in modern history, had access to royal spaces, the implications are staggering. And critics say that's only part of the story. According to claims now circulating around the Epstein document releases, investigators believe Epstein spent years financially supporting Sarah Ferguson after her divorce from Prince Andrew in 1996. Payments, loans, and financial assistance that allegedly stretched for more than a decade. 15 years of support. And Sarah herself publicly admitted receiving money from Epstein in 2011, around £15,000 to help pay debts. But investigators now want to know whether that financial relationship extended beyond Sarah. Because according to some interpretations of the files, Epstein appeared unusually interested in Sarah's daughters. Emails asking about them, messages requesting introductions, comments suggesting he wanted contact. And critics say Epstein was not known for casual friendships. Every connection in his world tended to serve a purpose, which leads to the most disturbing allegation now being whispered, that payments may have been directed toward people who could help Epstein maintain access, silence uncomfortable situations, or smooth relations with powerful institutions. And that's where the rumors surrounding Eugenie become explosive. Because according to the claims now circulating among Epstein accusers, investigators believe certain individuals in Epstein's network helped manage problems, whether by arranging introductions, helping maintain connections, or discouraging complaints. The accusations remain unproven, but the fact they're being discussed at all is sending the palace into a quiet state of alarm, and the consequences are already starting to appear. Because while the palace has not publicly acknowledged these rumors, insiders claim the royal family has already begun distancing itself from the York sisters. One of the clearest signs came with an event that usually represents royal unity, Royal Ascot, a centerpiece of the British social calendar where senior royals gather publicly in care carriages, appear together in photographs, and reinforce the image of a united monarchy. But this time, according to reports, Eugenie and Beatrice were told they would not be attending. The explanation given publicly was vague: a wider decision regarding appearances, a quiet reshuffling of royal visibility. But insiders say the meaning was unmistakable: distance. And it didn't stop there. Sources claim Prince William has privately instructed members of the royal family to avoid appearing in photographs with the York sisters for the foreseeable future. A move that, if true, would be an extraordinary signal within royal protocol. Because photographs inside the monarchy are not just pictures, they are messages. And this message would be clear: contain the scandal before it spreads. But perhaps the most dramatic suggestion circulating among royal commentators involves something even more drastic: the possibility that Eugenie and Beatrice could be pressured to renounce their royal titles. Some critics argue the titles themselves are what allow the sisters to maintain influence in business ventures, charity roles, and international partnerships. Without them, they would simply be private citizens. And that idea is now gaining traction among commentators who believe the monarchy must protect its image at all costs. Meanwhile, inside Eugenie's personal life, the pressure is reportedly becoming overwhelming. Insiders claim she is now focused on protecting her two young children, August and Ernest, from the growing storm around her name. But that may not be the only escape route she's considering, because one surprising figure has allegedly become a source of support during this crisis: Prince Harry. Yes, the same royal exile who walked away from the institution and built a new life thousands of miles away. Sources claim Eugenie sees him as proof that life exists outside the royal system, and according to whispers inside palace circles, she may even be considering following a similar path. But if she does, the consequences could be permanent. Relationships with Prince William and Kate could collapse entirely, and the monarchy's fragile attempt to keep this scandal contained could unravel overnight. Because the real question investigators may soon face is simple: if the Epstein files keep revealing new names, new connections, and new accusations, how far up the royal ladder could this story actually go? The deeper investigators dig into the Epstein files, the more uncomfortable the questions surrounding Princess Eugenie become. Because once the first domino falls in a scandal like this, people start asking a much more dangerous question: who else knew, and who else stayed silent? The public may have only recently started paying attention to Eugenie's alleged connections, but inside certain circles the whispers have been circulating for years. Quiet conversations behind palace doors, journalists exchanging cautious notes, victims telling investigators that the royal connections in Epstein's world were far more complicated than anyone wanted to admit publicly. For a long time, those claims sat in the shadows, dismissed as speculation. But now that Epstein's documents, emails, and financial records have been pouring into investigators' hands, the shadows are getting smaller. Because according to sources familiar with the ongoing scrutiny, the names of Princess Eugenie and Princess Beatrice appear repeatedly throughout the Epstein-related documents. Not always as central figures, but often enough to raise eyebrows. Often enough for investigators to start mapping patterns. And patterns are exactly what investigators look for when they believe a network was operating in plain sight. The central concern now isn't simply whether the sisters knew Epstein. That fact has already been acknowledged publicly for years. The concern is whether the relationship extended beyond casual acquaintance. Whether the connection was deeper, more beneficial, more transactional than the public ever realized. One of the details raising eyebrows is Epstein's unusual interest in maintaining communication with Sarah Ferguson and her daughters long after his criminal conviction. For most public figures, Epstein's prison sentence would have been the end of the relationship, a clear signal to distance themselves immediately. But in this case, critics say the opposite appeared to happen. Contact continued, emails were exchanged, meetings were discussed, and every time those communications are re-examined, people notice something else. Epstein didn't just maintain contact with Sarah Ferguson. He repeatedly referenced her daughters. Investigators believe Epstein had a fascination with proximity to royal influence, not necessarily for prestige alone, but for what that proximity could provide: credibility, connections, protection. Being able to say he knew members of the British royal family carried a certain weight in elite circles. And according to critics studying the emails, Epstein seemed very aware of that power. Which leads to another detail that investigators reportedly find troubling: the financial trail surrounding Sarah Ferguson. For years, it was widely reported that Epstein had provided financial assistance to Ferguson when she was struggling with debt following her divorce from Prince Andrew. Transfers of money, loans, debt relief, all framed publicly as acts of generosity from a wealthy friend. But when investigators follow money trails, they rarely stop with the obvious recipient. They follow every direction the money could travel. And that is why speculation surrounding Eugenie has intensified. Because if Epstein was financially supporting Sarah Ferguson for more than a decade, investigators are asking whether any of that support indirectly benefited other members of the York family. Was the money purely personal assistance to Ferguson? Or did it also help sustain a lifestyle, social circle and network that included her daughters? These are the kinds of questions that transform a scandal from embarrassing to explosive. Meanwhile, inside the royal family, the response has reportedly shifted from cautious patience to quiet damage control. The monarchy has survived countless scandals over centuries, but the Epstein scandal carries a uniquely toxic reputation. Anyone associated with it, even indirectly, becomes radioactive almost overnight, and the royal institution understands that better than anyone. This is why the decision to distance the York sisters from major royal events has been interpreted by many analysts as a preemptive move, a signal to the public that the monarchy is drawing a line between the core working royals and the extended family members whose reputations have become liabilities. Royal Ascot was only the first sign. Behind the scenes, insiders claim discussions have taken place about reducing the visibility of Beatrice and Eugenie even further. Fewer public appearances, fewer official invitations, fewer opportunities to appear in photographs with senior royals. The logic is simple. If a scandal grows, the monarchy wants the damage contained to the smallest possible circle. But containment becomes far more difficult when the public begins turning against the individuals involved. And that shift appears to be happening rapidly. Social media has become flooded with debates over the role of the York sisters. Some people argue they were simply young women caught in the orbit of their parents' decisions. Others argue that adulthood brings responsibility, and that remaining silent about Epstein after his conviction raises uncomfortable moral questions. For critics, the silence is the most suspicious element of all, because Epstein's crimes were not hidden rumors at the time. His conviction in 2008 made international headlines. Anyone connected to him would have known that continuing the relationship carried reputational risks. Yet the association persisted, and now, years later, those decisions are coming back under a much harsher spotlight. Inside Eugenie's personal world, the pressure is reportedly becoming overwhelming. Friends close to her say she feels trapped between two realities. On one side is the royal family, an institution that demands loyalty but can distance itself from members when scandals erupt. On the other side is the outside world, where leaving the monarchy means surrendering titles, security, and lifelong identity. That tension may explain why Eugenie has reportedly turned to one particular relative for guidance, Prince Harry. Not just what she knew, not just what she did, but whether the world is about to discover that Epstein's influence reached even deeper into the world's most powerful families than anyone previously imagined.